How do you protect your motorcycle from being stolen? You know, that's a question that I see on various forums, and I've been asked that a few times on MCrider. Well, fortunately, I've never been the victim of a motorcycle theft, but my wife did get her car stolen in the apartment complex that we lived in when we first got married. Like a lot of couples, we didn't have a whole lot of money when we were first married, and the car wasn't worth a whole lot, but it had a lot of value to us because we didn't really have the money to replace it. The car was parked outside of our apartment building. We came out the next morning and it was gone. The police did recover it a few days later. The end result was it cost us a few $100s in repairs. They busted the rear passenger window out and they did damage to the steering column when they stole the car. But surprisingly, one of the biggest expenses was paying for the impound fee to get the car back after it was recovered by the police and towed to the impound lot. It was an older car and we only carried liability insurance on it, so the costs were up to us to recover it and to pay for the repairs on it. One funny thing is we had to start the car with a screwdriver for a few weeks until we could get that steering column fixed. So if anybody needs tips on hot wiring a car, I can at least start it if you break into the steering column. But motorcycles are a little easier to steal. Sometimes they can be put in neutral and rolled off, especially if there are no precautions on the motorcycle to protect it. The type of motorcycle you ride has an impact on whether it's likely to be stolen. Surprisingly, some of the most stolen motorcycles are Hondas and Yamahas, the super sport types. Even in states where Harley-Davidson is more popular, Hondas and Yamahas are the most stolen motorcycles. So it depends on what state you live in. That has an impact as well. States that have longer riding seasons, California, Arizona, Texas, they have higher amounts of bike theft. Also, the level of protection that you put on your motorcycle has an impact on whether your motorcycle is stolen or not. So this week on MCrider, let's talk about motorcycle theft, what you can do to protect your motorcycle, and some things that you probably haven't thought about that relate to how likely your motorcycle is to be stolen. I went to the MotoGP races a few years ago. It was the second season of the GP race being held at Austin. And I'd gone the year before, the first season as well. And on that trip, I'd ridden my motorcycle in and camped near the track and had a good time. That second year, my family found out how much fun I was having and they wanted to go with me. So we took the car and my wife and daughters went with me to the race. We stayed in a hotel that wasn't too far from the track, and the parking lot was full of motorcycles in town for the weekend. On the Saturday night before the race, the hotel security camera caught a large moving truck that pulled into the parking lot at about 3:30 or 4 a.m. Several people got out of that truck. They lowered a ramp going into the back of the truck, and they loaded about 10 motorcycles into the back of the truck. They were probably on the property and gone in less than 10 minutes. Now, I never actually saw the security footage, but it was described to me by one of the riders who had his motorcycle stolen. You know, there's one thing that all of the bikes that were looked at by the thieves but were not stolen had in common. They were either covered by a motorcycle cover or they had some kind of anti-theft device. Any kind of anti-theft device. It didn't matter if the bike was just covered, the thieves didn't take time to look underneath the cover. If the handlebars were locked with the fork locks, the thief didn't take time to break the lock. If they looked at the bike and saw it had a disc lock on the caliper of the motorcycle or was chained to a fixed object, or even several motorcycles that were chained together by the rear wheel, the thieves bypassed those motorcycles and moved on to easier targets. In this instance, the thieves were stealing bikes of opportunity. They wanted in the lot and out of the lot as quickly as possible, and if your motorcycle offered any kind of resistance, it was left behind. In researching for this video, I found a really interesting thread on Reddit. Now, I have a link to that story at mcrider.com/theft, so you can go there to find the link to this story, and it's really interesting if this is a topic that you want to learn more about. I know I learned a lot from reading it. The forum post was started by a former motorcycle thief, and he went from stealing motorcycles to run in his own chop shop for a period of time. He has a very open thread for riders to ask him anything that they want to know about his former life as a motorcycle thief. The guy writing the article makes no excuses for his former life. In fact, he talks about how wrong he was and doesn't really understand how he got involved in that lifestyle, but he's now trying to turn things around. And I think part of him turning it around is trying to help other riders take precautions with their motorcycles. I think it's kind of therapeutic for him. So there's a ton of great information in that article from someone who knows the inside of that business, and he answers questions from a lot of owners about how best to protect their motorcycle. You know, in reality, there's not much we can do as a motorcycle owner to stop a determined thief. If they really want your motorcycle and they're willing to work at it, they can get your motorcycle. But just like I learned a few years ago at the MotoGP race, motorcycle theft is mostly a crime of opportunity. The harder we make it on the thief, the more likely they are to determine that it's not worth the extra time and risk to steal your particular motorcycle. So let's talk about some levels of protection, and you can figure out what you're most comfortable with. The first level of protection that we can take is on any motorcycle is using the steering lock or the fork lock that comes on your motorcycle. Steering lock's an anti-theft device. It allows you to turn the handlebars full to the left or right, and usually there's a lock that's attached to the ignition switch, and sometimes it's a separate lock down on the steering head of the motorcycle that allows you to lock the handlebars, full to the left or to the right. Now, this will keep a thief from walking up to the motorcycle, putting the bike in neutral, and rolling off with your pride and joy. A steering lock can be broken, but it takes time and it looks suspicious to others if your motorcycle's parked in a wide open area for the thief to break the steering lock. So they can twist on the handlebars or sometimes kick the handlebars to get the steering lock to break. The next level of protection that you can add to your motorcycle is adding a cover, particularly if you're parking in a hotel parking lot or somewhere overnight. It's even better if that cover has eyelets in it that allow you to lock the cover onto the motorcycle, so you can put it over the top, and then it has eyelets at the bottom that you can run a lock through and lock it to your motorcycle. The cover not only protects the motorcycle from the elements, but it's one more step for a thief to go through to get to the motorcycle. In fact, most times they don't even look under the cover because they know it's an added inconvenience to them getting the motorcycle, and it makes them look more conspicuous out in the parking lot. The third step that you can add is a caliper lock. And caliper locks are very common, and it's something that attaches to the brake caliper on one of the wheels of the motorcycle. Many calipers also have a tampering alarm that will not allow the motorcycle to roll without that alarm going off, or if someone is messing with the caliper lock, it will set off an audible alarm, and the motorcycle can't roll as long as the caliper lock is in place. That is, the discussion on the caliper locks is one area where I learned quite a bit from our former motorcycle thief. His recommendation was to purchase a caliper lock for around $100. He said cheaper locks can be defeated and removed fairly easily. Secondly, his advice was to always put the lock on the rear tire, on the rear caliper. It makes sense if you think about it. We most often add the lock to the front tire because it makes it easier for us to get it on and off the motorcycle when we're ready to ride. But that also makes it easier for the thief, and if they're forced to cut the caliper and remove the lock, it's much more difficult to do so on the rear tire because they've got less room to work with. The next level of protection that you can add is chaining the motorcycle to a fixed object. Like I said, at the GP races in Austin, some guys save their motorcycles just by chaining them together at the rear tire and making it inconvenient for the thieves to get the chain off and remove the motorcycles. So if you're doing this, invest in a good chain and not one that can be cut with small lock cutters. So if you're chaining the motorcycle, it's always better to chain to the frame or somewhere on the forks that can't be removed by just pulling the front tire. You don't really want to lock it to the front tire But if you do have to run the chain through a tire, it's better to do so at the rear tire than the front, because the rear tire is much more difficult and time-consuming to remove. The final step that you can add to protect your motorcycle is a low jack system or some type of a GPS tracker or some kind of recovery tracking device that you can put on your motorcycle. A good device will notify you if the motorcycle is being tampered with, and if you've taken some of the previous recommendations, it'll give you some time to respond before your motorcycle rolls off to the chop shop. It's also a great peace of mind if you've got a device like this on your motorcycle and your motorcycle is out of your view at a hotel. Just some peace of mind of knowing if someone is out there looking at or messing with your motorcycle. A few weeks ago, I was sent this GPS tracker from a company called Moto, and this is the box that tracker came in. The tracker itself sells on Amazon for $199, and then the cost, you get 2 months of service with that for free, but then it costs about $350 a month to maintain the SIM card service in the device. So basically there are 3 parts to this. There's the tracker, and this is what the tracker looks like, give you an idea of the size on it. The tracker comes with AA batteries that last about a year, and this part is hidden on the motorcycle. And then you've got a key fob that you keep with you. So as long as this key fob and the tracker are in place, it's not going to set the tracking off or set the alarm off on the tracker device. The third part of the system is an app that they provide for you. They've got an iPhone and an Android version of this, and this is what sends you notifications, and this will actually give you a call if someone is messing with your motorcycle, as long as this key fob is not in range. So separate the key fob from this, hide this on the motorcycle. It's going to notify you if someone moves or messes with your motorcycle, and then it's also going to provide GPS tracking. If the motorcycle's moved from the parking lot, you'll be able to see where it goes to, and once the motorcycle finally stops moving, it's going to tell you what the final location for it was. So I'm going to have to stick a quick update in there. I tried to get this Moto working. My original plan was I was going to go back to the Rocket 3 in the background, and I was going to show you guys this working in action. So I was going to trigger an alarm, come back and show you how quick that happened. Unfortunately, it didn't work here in the shop. And part of the issue might be that I'm in a metal shop and my cell phone access is really bad in this area where I live. In fact, when we moved here, we had to switch from AT&T to Verizon in order to get decent signal because we were getting too many dropouts with AT&T. So I'm not sure what cell service that uses. It's got an embedded SIM card, so you can't switch it out. So I thought, well, it's an issue with my location. So I hopped on the motorcycle, rode over and got some lunch, and I thought I would test it there. Took all my camera gear with me, and unfortunately the place that I stopped was not getting cell service either, and this was right in the middle of town. It was showing me that everything was okay, but it never would dial out. It never would activate whenever I was moving the motorcycle around. That's with the key fob well away from the motorcycle, Bluetooth turned off on the phone, and me just trying to set the alarm off. So as it stands right now in North Texas, I can't recommend this as a solution, but there's some problems with that anyway, this type of GPS or tracked system, and I'll talk to you guys about that here in just a second. I recorded that earlier, but anyway, I always want to be honest with you guys. They sent me this product free of charge. They didn't have any control over the review, obviously, but I appreciate them sending it out. We gave it a good shot, and unfortunately, this does not work for the location that I live in. But the biggest downside is this. Remember I talked about my car being stolen early in this video? I got it back, but the cost of repair and the impound fees were almost more than the car was actually worth. So this has a similar problem. A device like this doesn't announce its presence A thief doesn't know it's there, and by the time you get there, if they've already left the scene, it's too late. What they may have likely caused damage to your steering column if they broke the fork locks. Perhaps they cut the caliper in order to remove the caliper lock, and maybe even cut other parts to remove a chain, or at least scratched up your motorcycle. The point is, most of the damage, or a lot of the damage, is already done. You might get your motorcycle back, but you're likely not to be riding it, depending on what they had to do to attempt to steal it. And insurance may just total the motorcycle, and you're at a loss of the motorcycle minus the deductible that you've got on the motorcycle. So it's much better to not have your motorcycle stolen than for it to be stolen and recovered. The best way that you can keep it from being stolen is to take the steps to make it riskier and more inconvenient for the thief. Realize as well that the more steps you take to make your thief pass by your motorcycle are also something that makes it more inconvenient for you every time you get on and off the motorcycle. So in my opinion, it's just like riding gear. I ride every time with the full face helmet, jacket, boots, and gloves every time I ride. Would it be more convenient to ride in shorts, a t-shirt, and a ball cap? Well, sure, but for me, the risk of riding with no gear is greater than the inconvenience of putting it on every time I ride the motorcycle. So how much protection do you want for your motorcycle? Well, I think the answer to that depends on you. How much inconvenience do you want every time you get on and off the motorcycle? But it also depends on how risk or high risk of an area you're parking the motorcycle. You can adjust your level of protection on the bike depending on where you're parking at and where you have to leave your motorcycle. I know for me, from direct experience now, that if I ride again to the MotoGP races, my motorcycle will be locked down in a hotel parking lot. I saw a whole bunch of riders lose their motorcycle and a good weekend to a thief of opportunity in Austin, Texas. I'll have links to all of the products mentioned in this video so that you can explore the various levels of protection for yourself and see what works well for you. You can find that at mcrider.com/theft. Till next week, guys, it's Ken with MC Rider, and I'll see you on the road.